Good girl. All right. Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video where I answer gardening questions on Sundays. You can ask questions down below this video and I will pick from them each week. I try to get semi-unique questions from a week-to-week basis, so if I'm not answering your question, it may have been answered in previous question and answer videos, and there is a playlist on the channel. It has over 100 videos in it, so if you really want to put yourself to sleep, there's an opportunity there late at night. If you're having a sleepless night, Jim's Q&A videos are probably the answer. Holly, no ma'am. We're not going to start the video like that. No ma'am. You can't see her right now, but she's trying to eat grass already. So okay, I'm in a good spot, so I can monitor Holly's behavior in the garden from here. It's super windy, so if you hear that in the mic, that's why. It's like 30-mile-an-hour winds all weekend, so this is my best opportunity here to shoot this. I just shot a tour video of the garden. Almost all of the pansy turnover has happened, for my winter garden, so you'll see that tomorrow, and lots of good content this week, including the one-day landscape job, that continuation of that landscape rehab. I called that video. Anyway, let's get to some gardening questions. There were lots of questions about just protecting plants this past week, and for winter. And I did a webinar with the National Garden Bureau on Friday. You can go to their website and probably watch that webinar if you want to. There were a lot of folks who follow the channel were actually in. I saw in that webinar, and I forgot to mention it in last Sunday's video. When I do those webinars that are free, I will let you guys know about them. I apologize for that, but. In that webinar, I was just basically saying, don't overprotect your plants because when it really gets cold later in the winter, they need to be completely dormant. A lot of times we panic when it's 35 degrees or 32 degrees and we don't let the plants actually acclimate to cold. And once they're fully dormant, most plants are fine. As long as they're hardy in your area, just let them go dormant. Everything will be fine. But like I say, some early protection this time of year can actually be bad later in the winter. When I had my nursery, that was our biggest fear going into winter, is that we wouldn't have a lead up into winter. Because that lead up into winter, these 35-degree nights and 32-degree nights and 28-degree nights and 25-degree nights prepare the plants for the 12-degree nights. And so, that's kind of important. So don't overprotect. Most things, if they're hardy in your area and they're in the ground and they've been in the ground for a little while, they're going to be fine. If they're not hardy in your area, you do want to protect those things. Get houseplants inside, get palms, protected that aren't hardy in your area. Those could dig up your dahlias if you're trying to save them through the winter and you're in a cold area, so on and so forth. There are things to do, but for the most part, the hardy plants in your area, let them go to sleep and don't worry about them. Okay. Somebody asked me about keeping a tea olive variety that would stay small, osmanthus variety. There are lots of different osmanthus species. Osmanthus fragrans I have here in my landscape. But there's lots of different species of osmanthus, but most all of them get pretty daggone big. The variegated one, goshiki, does stay smaller, and it does flower. It can take a few years for it to flower, but the variegated one, goshiki, but even I've seen 8 feet tall. It just gets there much slower, and you can probably keep it more like 3 or 4 feet. Great plant, beautiful plant. But again, it takes that one a few years to flower. Once it does, though, it puts on a big show, or not a big show, but a very fragrant flowering in the wintertime. I didn't say that well. It's not. The flowers aren't super showy, but they're super fragrant. Okay. Somebody asked me about pulling mulch back to plant plants if it was completely necessary, where they have hardwood mulch down on the ground and they want to just dig holes and make it faster. Yeah, you really do need to pull that hardwood mulch back and then dig your holes, plant your plants, and then bring your mulch back into place. Some barks are okay. Compost, if you were using that as mulch, that's okay. A lot of things would be okay. Even leaf mold probably would be okay. But hardwood mulch, where you got chunks of wood, I don't want to mix that stuff deep down into the soil, because if you deny it oxygen, you deny it light, give it water, it actually can break down improperly, and the soil will smell super funky. So if you have hardwood mulch, you do need to pull it back, plant your plants, and then put your hardwood back. If a piece or two of hardwood mulch gets mixed in, that's not what I'm talking about. That's no big deal. I'm saying that don't put loads of it down into the ground. But don't panic if it's a few pieces of wood fall in the hole. Okay. Somebody asked me about seeding their shady lawn, and they have lots of deciduous trees, meaning leaves are going to be dropping constantly in the fall. Although fall is the best time to plant fescue and bluegrass and some of those cool season grasses, if you have lots of shade trees, I find that the early spring is the time to do it, after you can get the leaves pulled back. So you could wait till all the leaves fall and then remove them, but then sometimes the soil temperature can actually be too cold for the grass seed to germinate. So you're best at that point just to probably wait until, late February or early March and clean it up. So despite the fact that fall is the best time to plant those cool season grasses, for some people it's just not. And that's true with a lot of rules in gardening or best practices in gardening. It doesn't apply if you're gonna have this, leaves pile on it this deep and then it kills it all as it's germinating. So I just wait till the late winter to do it. It does have some impact if you're using chemicals, which I don't use any chemicals, but if you were using pre-emergent herbicides and things, you wouldn't be able to do that, seeding at that time. Okay, somebody asked me about, so this is a question I get frequently about, is there an advantage to buying larger containers for the plant? Like if a plant's available in a 1 gallon container or a 2 gallon container or a 5 gallon or a 25 gallon container, is there an advantage to buying larger ones? I say no, not at all, especially if something is pretty fast growing. I'm gonna buy it in the smallest pot possible. And you see a lot of these perennials out here. In that tour video you'll see tomorrow, there's a gold pineapple sage that's 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide in full bloom. I bought it in a 3.5 inch pot in the spring. So no, there's no advantage whatsoever if it's a faster growing thing that can establish pretty quickly. With that said, if you're planting a teeny tiny pot and it's July, that can kind of be a struggle if it's in the heat of the summer or the cold. A smaller plant's going to be less cold hardy in all likelihood, a less established plant. So if you're planting at the optimum time, I prefer smaller containers. I like to watch things grow. Slow growing things, specimen plants, those are the things I'm probably going to put a little bit of money into. Things that only grow a couple inches a year. Maybe I want to buy something that's already in a 7 gallon and write the big check for that, but then save money on all the other pieces. So I don't think there's no long-term advantage if you're planting at the right times, the small pots. And I've always thought that, especially, I never liked, the whole time I landscaped, I probably only planted 10 balled and burlap trees the entire time I had my landscape company. 7-8 years of landscaping with 2 crews. I never planted B&B stuff because I always knew smaller container trees would catch those trees that had been torn out of the field and the roots had been cut on them and damaged. They'd catch them and pass them in 5 years, and that was always pretty true. So no, I don't think there's a big advantage, but and save your money and invest it in that key thing that you really, really want, like my weeping redbud or my interesting Japanese maple, and save your money on the other stuff. Okay. Somebody's got a contorted filbert that's weeped all the way to the ground and want to know what to do about it. Just cut those branches off a few, maybe 6 or 12 inches off the ground. I did a flowering cherry at the old house that did that every summer, and I just cut them. I gave them a haircut where they were maybe 12 inches off the ground. I've got my weeping redbud is weeped all the way to the ground. It needs to be pruned up. I've been waiting for the leaves to fall off of it, and then I'm just going to limb it up to about, off the ground about 12 inches. But any of those weeping plants, they just continue to weep until they reach the ground. Just give them a haircut. And if you want to cut them 2 feet off the ground, if that looks better on your particular plant, you might want to cut them 6-8 inches, off the ground and stand back and look at it, and then, see if you want to raise it up from there. You can pretty much do that anytime you want on that type of thing. It's not going to hurt it. Okay. So, okay, here's a question. Somebody has some wood. They want to dump their wood ash from their fire in the garden and want to know if it will have any negative impact. Then I got a separate question on somebody wanting to dump their carbon when they replace their carbon filter in their refrigerator, and everybody knows this from carbon filters, you get that black water initially, and want to know about pouring that carbon water out in their garden. None of these kinds of things matter unless you dump them in the same spot over and over and over again. So you can dump your wood ash and your carbon water and food waste, and it would be weird to dump food waste out in the garden, but for pests. But these things you're concerned about affecting, the potassium or the calcium or something like that in the garden only matter if you just keep piling them in the same spot. So distribute them throughout the garden and they'll be actually beneficial to your garden. Pile them in the same spot over and over and over again, you probably will cause some sort of, having too much of one nutrient, in that spot. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked about this Dracaena, this spike. Will it survive the winter? It survived last winter, sitting here without any problem. It didn't get below, I think 19 or something was the coldest night I had last year. So anything below that, I'll put it on the porch right behind me. Anything below maybe 15, I'll put it in the house. But these things are quite a bit more hardy than you would think. And now this one's 2 years old, so it should be fine. There are probably 2 or 3 nights during the winter I need to pick this pot up and take it inside. But for the most part, it'll be outside all winter. Okay. Somebody asked me. I talked about last week. When you plant something new, people always talk about it takes like 3 years before the plant gets, or the 3rd year before the plant really gets growing. And I kind of think that, if you're planting things correctly and things should just start growing. But they heard that, but they had planted a Romeo Clara, which is a variegated Clara, and it hardly grew any last year. That's because it's a variegated Clara. My Juliet Clara over there has only grown about this much since I planted it. Variegated plants, just in general, will grow a bit slower. They don't have as much. They don't have much chlorophyll to use. And so variegated, I talked about that with that Goshiki osmanthus on that osmanthus question. The real reason that variegated osmanthus seems to stay smaller, it'll eventually get big, it's because it's variegated. It's just growing slower. So, okay. Somebody wanted to know when to prune their brandywine viburnum. That's a proven winner's introduction, but it's a viburnum nudum, which is a native viburnum. They bloom in the spring, and so after they bloom, you can prune it. Keep in mind that any pruning you do on one of those after they flower is going to eliminate the berries that you probably bought it for. So if you're having to constantly prune it to control it, actually they said it was leggy, so it's probably in too much shade as well. So if I was having to prune something after it flowered each time and it was something that I wanted to see the berries on, I probably just have the plant in the wrong place. You may need to put it in a spot where you can allow it to get a little bigger and it has a little more sun to keep it from stretching as much. Okay, somebody asked me what I use for growing my seeds in the house, and so any of my vegetables and annuals and things that I do from seed. I'm kind of all over the place with it. Sometimes I'll use a peat-based mix with perlite. I'm trying to use less peat moss, but a peat moss perlite mix works great. A compost and perlite mix, just as good. And so that's what you'll see me using as we go into spring, and that's what I used this fall. So all of my fall vegetables out here it was compost, and it was whatever compost was, a halfway quality compost that you can get from anywhere in a bag. And then I mixed that 50-50 with perlite to make it lighter, because compost it's heavy. Heck, it makes even the trays heavy. But I want to make it lighter, and I want to make it drain a little better. So that's it, compost and perlite. It doesn't wick the water up as well. So if you use peat moss, one of the beautiful advantages of peat moss is peat moss has a really great wicking ability. And so I can water from the bottom. I can fill my trays, and the water will soak up that direction, and I don't have to disturb my seedlings. You may find that a compost mix will not soak the water up. It won't wick the water quite as well. So keep that in mind, that you may have to water top down a little bit. Just be real gentle when you do it. Okay, somebody asked me when to prune their distilium. If you have to prune them, distilium get crazy limbs on them. If you have to prune them, and it's just a crazy limb, anytime you want to, 12 months out of the year. If you have to do general pruning on them, you can wait until the late winter, early spring. They do bloom. It's not a great flowering plant, but they do get little frilly flowers along the stems. So if you want to see them bloom first, do it right after they bloom. If you don't care about the blooms and the blooms are kind of insignificant, you can do it in March before they bloom. But you will be removing the flowers when you prune it, if you do it beforehand. Somebody asked me, and I get this question occasionally, what's the difference between, this person specifically asked what's the difference between zone 8A and 8B, but this would be true of anything on the horticultural zone map. So the horticultural zone map was originally divided by 10-degree increments, Fahrenheit increments. And so in my area, it was originally just zone 7. You hear me say I'm in zone 7B, but originally I was just in zone 7. In zone 7, the average low temperature was like 10 degrees Fahrenheit, or maybe it was 5 degrees Fahrenheit, I don't remember. Was 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And zone 6 was 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Zone 5 was negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit, so on and so forth. So it was 10-degree increments. But what we found is there's a ton of plants, very specifically, azaleas die at a certain temperature, and we kind of know what that temperature is for certain plants. And so the map was further divided into 5-degree increments. And so the difference between me being in zone 7A and being in zone 7B where I am is our average low temperature for the winter is about 5 degrees warmer than 7A, but that's the difference. And it's significant. It's actually significant. There are a lot of plants we would not list for zone 7 if it was just zone 7. But there you'll see me occasionally on the screen put up something that says 7B in parentheses 8 to 11, meaning that we'll grow in 7B, just not 7A. That 5 degrees makes a huge difference. Okay, somebody asked me if I can transplant a butterfly bush now. Yeah, as it's going to sleep, I'm going to wait to transplant the one that's behind the camera back here until a little later in the winter, but I'm going to root prune it now to prepare it to be moved. But you could do it now if you wanted to, but again, I'm going to wait until mine is a little later in the winter, so it doesn't have to go through the winter having been stressed from moving it. Let's see. Somebody asked me if I deadhead my snapdragons. I do, but I typically, it's gotten cold now, and I don't do a lot of deadheading on the pinching on the pansies or deadheading on the snapdragons. I'll probably wait till the other side of winter at this point, and then I'll cut them, late February, and that will help fill them out, because I'm really planting snapdragons not so much for the color that it's going to give me in November and December and January. I'm planting them for February, March, April, May. So I'll prune them toward the end of winter, or mid-winter, mid to late winter. But easy for me to say. Okay, somebody asked about marking plants for winter, and one of the viewers answered it down below with using golf tees. So if you have perennials, let's say you plant bulbs, you can use golf tees for where you planted the bulbs, or you have perennials that are going to sleep. Golf tees work great. I said it in a video last year as well, but thank you for answering that question down there, because that is a great answer. Golf tees work great for that, and if you forget about them, it's just wood and it'll just break down, and it's mulch. So anyway, thank you guys for following along with these question and answer videos. I'll be back next week with another one, and you can ask questions down below this video, and I'll pick from those. Thanks for watching.